Well, it's not being utilized, but it's also not a shell.
Okay.
So we have to go in and we have to really decide, are we going to make it a shell, and we probably will, and then rebuild it. Yeah, from the inside out.
No historical energy on it all.
That's the problem. There really isn't much. And what I'd like to try to do is figure out a way that we can do a real simulation, not a computational simulation, but some sort of simulation in that building. What I thought about is if we could put enough point sources of energy into it, then on a cold winter night, we probably ought to be able to do some really nice infrared thermal imaging and begin to see where the big energy flows are out of it. And maybe from that kind of an experiment, we could get something like a baseline. Whereas in this building right now, I'm sure if I asked for a baseline, I could get a really good number. But at the Navy Yard, I can't. They just didn't keep those kinds of records. Just brought coal, shoveled it in, fired it up, and kept it warm in the winter.
If it's not occupied now, it would be realistic.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah, the other part of this I haven't mentioned, I should have mentioned along the way, is we know how to make buildings energy efficient, right? Just wrap them up, close them up, put in a lot of insulation. We did some of that in the 80s. Most of you will remember that sort of thing. We made everybody sick in the process, too. So, the other key problem here is how do you make a building energy efficient, but at the same time make a comfortable and livable space for people and take them into account, sort of a human-centered approach. Yes, you had a question?
Yeah. Is this building going to be a LEED certified building?
Well, it'll be LEED plus. Our goal is to get a minimum 30%, which would bring us to LEED or above. We think we could do that right now with off-the-shelf components. But the problem is just the integration and getting the systems in place with the kinds of mechanisms that the building community uses today. Turner Building is also in construction, is also on our team. So we're working with them pretty closely to try to understand this. But the first place we ran into this whole issue right away, squarely, is how do you spend $30 million of PIP funds? Very, very slowly, and with a lot of regulations. It's sort of the opposite of what we want to do. Everything has to be bid, each little piece, and we really want to do an integrated approach. So already we're learning, and we want to keep track of that. Yes, sir?
Are there plans to utilize the existing steam infrastructure that's pretty much all over the Naval Yard?
I think so, yes.
I didn't see a lot of partners like Spyrex, Sarco, and some of the other.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. I think part of the reason for that is at the time that we were writing the proposal, keep in mind we didn't know that we would win. PIDC had not made the decision yet as to whether or not they were going to be a part of the new the city grid or stay off the grid. It wasn't until we won this that they made that decision. So in a sense, we're kind of backfilling now. And you caught that. That's very good. Yes?
Are there plans to involve any new construction in with this retrofit that
Yeah.
you're working on? Or
Yeah, I should have mentioned that too. I'm sorry. There, in the proposal, we did say that the first thing we would do is retrofit this building, and the second thing we would do is attach to it a new building and look at the integration of those two. I think we could do that. I'm not going to promise anymore that we will do that, and I don't think the DOE necessarily expects us to. Why is that? Well, $30 million sounds like a lot of money until you really start to work and all that and realize we're going to spend a fair amount of that just on the first building. And really that's where our emphasis needs to be, is on the retrofit. So stay tuned on that is what I would say. Yes, sir.
You have not just retrofits, but it seems to me that these are mostly all adaptive reuses, which is another piece of this thing. That building 661 or 261 was not dedicated to what you're going to be using it for.
Right.
And most of the buildings there weren't. So that's kind of an interesting angle that in your documentation.
Yes. We use the term retrofit. I like your term better. What was it again?
Adaptive reuse.
Reuse, yeah. Yeah. It's both that and the retrofit. Excellent point. Yes.
When you were speaking of the simulations, are these going to be a new standard for building simulation models that you're developing?
Yeah. It's a really good question. It turns out the DOE has spent a lot of money over the years in building their own software tools, which they give away. They find it hard to give them away, to be honest with you. Nobody wants to use them. They're painful to use. So, and then you've got the whole BMI community out there, which is building software tools too. And they don't go far enough, right? So they're a good way to sort of build a compendium of information and data about how to use it to control your systems. So our goal is to somehow take the best elements of what the DOE has done with their software efforts, merge those with BMI, and out of this I think should come something, I mean it won't be me, it won't be mine, but better software tools that should set a new standard and actually be things that people want to use and find fairly easy to use. Maybe even to the point, and we've talked about this, of iPads and iPhones or Blackberries and that sort of thing. So if you're sitting out in a pickup truck somewhere trying to look at this thing and estimate costs and what it's going to take and just get a first rough number, you can do it. You can do it. So there's a lot of progress to be made there, and for any of you who know people in the software area who are looking for new products to get engaged in, this is one that's huge. I mean, I come out of chemical engineering, and in chemical engineering, process modeling software is so advanced. It's incredible, but we got 30 years behind us, right? So we're not just doing static modeling of petroleum plants, we're doing dynamic modeling. We're not just doing, old-time sort of process control, distributed control. I don't see any of that in this field yet. It's really kind of surprising to me. And I think it comes back to the fact that it's so disintegrated, if I could use that term. It's not integrated, and so there weren't the big drivers like we had in the chemical and petroleum industry to get these things done.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.